if you are creating a model that isn't efficient or creating wrong data or just taking a long time, is that something that can obviously drive up costs from a multitude of ways? Yeah, you've integrated this, but it's not working optimally and you have no idea because this is how you think it's done, but your cost is 10x of what it should be. That's one of the things that can happen.
You can have different models for different functions. So you have your natural language model that will be interfacing with your customer service, but then you have another specific model that would be able to communicate across APIs. Those two models can talk to each other and perform certain functions. So really, once you've sort of identified what you require from AI, it's really about selecting those models and getting them to talk to each other.
Let's understand the landscape of AI. Unfortunately, it's changing every day. When we talked earlier about all the different models that are out there, those are being updated. New ones are coming out every second month. So at this point in time, you definitely have to keep your wits about you and understand what's better and what's changing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Make an Impact podcast. I'm your host, Makoto Kern. I've got my other co-hosts, Joe and Brynley.
Hey.
And so today on our another AI podcast that we'll be discussing is really more about, let's say you're a company and you want to use AI. Where do I begin? Where do I start using this? And, we want to really help out those companies. There's so much information out there, and knowing where to start is really important, because if you get started on the wrong foot, it's going to be an expensive project, or you can be really efficient. And, that's what, we can help with. And so Joe and Brynley are going to talk to us a little bit more about how to get started and all the details about that. So I think it's a good way to.
Yeah, I think it's also about kind of demystifying the what is AI. I've chatted to a few people who've always said, well, it just seems like such a barrier. Where do you even get started with it? What's it all about? I must need an AI expert, or how can it even help me? And I think these are questions that probably so many companies have, but don't know where to start. And you even think about where we've tried to explore topics that still dive into quite a lot of detail. But, I think we can extract in this podcast really just the high level items on, if you're thinking about introducing AI into your software, into your organization, what are the next steps you can take? And what are some of the kind of practical examples that you can do? So.
Yeah, and what kind of areas should you be focusing on within your organization? And we'll go through some examples of that.
All right. Joe, you want to kick us off with some AI modeling?
Yeah, exactly. So
it's
not an AI virtual, bot that's modeling for you.
Soon it could be, who knows? But maybe now it's a little bit more boring than that, but it's still interesting.
No, it's not boring at all. Yeah, once you dig into it,
not boring at all, but cool. Not as exciting as an AI model. So let's just make that clarification.
True, exactly. So what we'll talk about a bit is I'll just sort of discuss kind of what AI actually is. It's a big term. It gets thrown around with everything. AI is being labeled on a lot of initiatives and projects and software. And what is AI? What actually is it underneath? And I'll talk a little technically about it, try to break it down a little bit. But after that, we'll sort of go into a bit more of use cases for AI. And Brynley will go over that. And Makoto will discuss some of the real world integrations that you can look at in your company. And then I'll also talk a bit about, how can we determine that? How can we look at our company, look at what AI offers, once we've gone through this all, and kind of match the two together? So to talk a bit about AI, really what it really is in the end is models. And there are many models out there, and they all do different tasks. And you can think of each model as its own little program, right? It's got a specific purpose to it, and it does something for you. There are large models and there are tiny models. Like, large models would be something like ChatGPT. Tiny models would be very specialized. You can't really communicate with them with words, but you can give them some data. They can do something with that data and output an answer for you that you have on that. And so when we're talking about models are really just created almost databases. They're way more advanced than that. But you can think of it as just adding in a lot of data into a very specialized sort of container, which are called models, and the type of data that you feed into it and the way it's created will sort of create that outcome-based sort of solution around it. So an easy way to think of it is, we want to create a model which can understand when you give it images, is this an image of a cat or is it an image of a tree? A very simple idea. And so the way that works is that you'll get millions of images of cats. And each time you add a cat to the model, you'll tag that image and you'll say, this is a cat. And each time you add a picture of a tree, you'll tag it and say, this is a tree. And overall, once it's all in there and all those images are in there, what we're really doing is then being able to feed new images to it that's never seen before of a cat or a tree or something else and say to it, is this a cat or a tree? And based on that understanding it has and all the data it already has inside it, it can then make a predictive analysis in it and go, yes, this looks like a cat, this looks like a tree. That's really what we're doing here. And so even something like ChatGPT is really just an expansion of that. What that does is instead of feeding it images of cats and trees, they basically fed it the entire internet. You can almost think of it that way in terms of words and human language. And it's looked at conversations about how people have conversations. And when someone asks something, what the most likely answer is from that. So when you change to something like ChatGPT, which is obviously a large language model, really what it's doing is it's trying to predict what the answer to that would be. Your question, and it's trying to predict what would the sentence be to answer this or to sort of reply to this. It has no understanding of it. It doesn't know what you're asking. It has no intelligence really behind it. It's just predicting. And that's really what all of these models are. And so when you're looking at a solution for your business and you're looking at, okay, I have this process and right now we have some existing either manual process or we have some very complicated IT architecture that, takes a lot to maintain, that's costly, can we instead offload that to one of these specialized models that can do it for us a lot easier, a lot cheaper, and often a lot more effectively? That's one way of looking at it. Other ways, these models are just bringing out functionality which would be extremely hard to do before. Like again, ChatGPT. Yes, technically you could program and write an application that could pretend it's ChatGPT that has no error at all, but just sort of analyzing words and trying to come up with some crazy way of sort of responding. And in the past, there have been attempts at that, but nothing like ChatGPT. So really AI is also opening up new doors as well as sort of being able to improve efficiency of existing ones. So when we're looking at models, there's sort of a way to perceive them. Okay, we know models can do things for us. What models are there out there? There's really two ways of going about it. You can create your own models from scratch, or you can use existing models that are out there, and there are loads out there. And so really when you're thinking about AI and models, you're almost sort of browsing a shopping center of models. That's sort of the perspective I would take in it, and looking at what's out there, seeing are there existing models, and there's loads of open source ones, there's proprietary ones like, again, ChatGPT and OpenAI models. And you're really sort of browsing the category of them out there and going, which one of these would best fit my use case? And you can grab a few of them. There might be for your solution several models, some proprietary, some paid, some open source. And you can feed your data into it and sort of see, okay, how does that work? So a very simple example would be, looking at a predictive model and going, okay, I want a model that just does sentiment analysis. I'm going to feed it some text and I want to understand what's the sentiment behind that. Is a sentiment that, this is looking good or is it looking bad? So let's say we're trying to analyze financial data and we feed in an entire news article about, some company that we're looking into. We can gain sentiment out of that and get a score out of that. And that's all the model does. It doesn't do anything else for you. You can't chat to the model. You can just feed it information and it gives you a number and it says the sentiment around this is looking bad. And you go, okay, great. Then you feed 1 million different news articles and you automate this process, and I can just every day look at 20 companies and get an overview of all the public sentiments around these companies. You can make financial decisions based on that. So very specialized models around that. And for that, the open source models that you can use. So again, when we're taking a step back from this, we can spin up a model within a day that can start doing this, and we can build some solution around it. Otherwise, if we didn't have that model, to try and do this sort of predictive analysis manually, or to try and do it with experts, or like extremely sophisticated software, would take years to probably build out with experts. And it would be an extremely complicated thing to do, whereas models really simplify this. They're like a shortcut to getting to be able to spin up really interesting and powerful solutions. So yeah, looking at that and sort of understanding, okay, we got all these models out there. Okay, what can they do though? Let's dive into that a bit more. And so I'll just hand over to you, Bryn, and you can sort of go over some of the
sounds good.
Practical applications.
And I think interesting points, I think, bringing more context if someone was wondering what a model is exactly. Getting to what really is possible. So we have these models, as Joe was saying, you can choose between a number of different varieties of them, and they have these different possibilities or different capabilities almost. There really are a vast array of different options, but it really is important to stay practical. If you're interested, if your business is in a specific market or has specific functional requirements, just focus on those. So if we look at some of the common AI applications and functionality, we've got quite a few different ones. We'd start with probably what a lot of people think about when they think of AI, when you've got these sort of chat completion services. And it's really excellent for things like multi-turn conversations or just maintaining kind of context. So even being transferred between different departments or online sort of chats, these AI models are really good at being fed context and continuing and completing a conversation. So applications are things like customer support, really providing more real-time assistance by completing conversations with customers, answering common questions, and even helping customers resolve basic issues. So you really
Yeah.
allow your customer service department to be much more efficient and allow the AI to do a lot of the heavy lifting with the more basic issues that you may run into. So massive cost saving opportunities there.
Yeah, exactly. Just to expand on that one, the power behind chat completion is, again, when you're having a conversation with the AI, it almost feels like you're talking to a human. And outside of that, just sort of talking to it, the next step is actually asking it to do things for you. So when you're looking at an AI solution, you're looking at not just as what the model can do, but what can we connect up to that model to give us extra functionality around that. So let's say you want to have your AI do online ordering for you. So instead of a user having to log onto a website and add things to their cart, they could just say, hey, I want to buy some large socks in this brand. And it'll go, sure, I've added them to your cart for you. Is there anything else you want? And you go, nope, that's it. And it'll go, great, credited your account or whatever the case is. And you can add on that functionality on top of these models. They can be a really powerful layer between services that you want to offer.
And this is something that we've been looking at recently as well, Joe, where, looking at all those different model types, you can have different models for different functions. So you have your natural language model that'll be interfacing with your customer service, but then you have another specific model that would be able to communicate across APIs. And those two models can talk to each other and perform certain functions. So really, once you've sort of identified what you require from AI, it's really about selecting those models and getting them to talk to each other.
Yep.
I've got a quick question around that, just around if you don't set up your models correctly or if they're suboptimal. I assume that it's almost like when you code something efficiently or you don't. If you are creating a model that isn't efficient or creating wrong data or just taking a long time, is that something that can obviously drive up costs from a multitude of ways? I don't know if that's
Yeah.
something to explain where, yeah, you've integrated this, but it's not working optimally. And you have no idea because this is how you think it's done, but your cost is 10x of what it should be. And that's one of the things that can happen.
Absolutely. And I think there's sort of specifics, and Joe, you're probably going to go into this as well. I think there are really specifics, which we probably don't want to dive into looking at this, but I think we've covered on some previous episodes just around even things like token cost. And to answer your question, Makoto, I think absolutely, if you don't set up things correctly, if you don't have the right people to implement this, you could have a whole array of issues. Cost is one of them, but it's also incorrect answers, or again, there's some biases that can come through. So I think there's a lot to it there, but I think to sort of keep it in the scope of what we're talking about today, it's almost, well, what are the main things that you would want the AI to do? And I think just jumping back to the next. So we looked at chat completion. If we look at another function or capability of AI, it's text generation. And if you've ever played with any of the natural language processes, you'll see one of their abilities is amazing generation. So, being able to generate these sort of coherent pieces of text or poetry or creative writing, anything like that, can be amazing for content creation. So let's say whether you want creative or not, you can use the AI to automatically generate articles. So, for instance, you've had some customer service conversations, or you've had a request on a new product feature from your customer. That could be almost built out automatically into a fully spec document. So, what may have taken a product manager, an hour to write out can be generated in a few seconds. That's a massive sort of power feature. And, this is generating blog posts or product descriptions or, keywords for marketing, helping with SEO. all these kind of text generation opportunities are offered through the AI. And then we look at another use, which is forecasting. So if we look at something called time series forecasting, it really can help sort of predict future values. It can be applied in industries like financial, weather, resource planning. A good example is with sales predictions as well. So sort of predicting future sales trends, looking at historical data, and just helping businesses manage their inventory and even their marketing strategies. So, some really, really valuable features there as well. Going on, another one, and we'll look at another three potential uses, is with translation. So you can look at things like text to image or optical character recognition, or OCR, as well as computer vision, which kind of covers things like object detection, image classification, facial recognition. All those are capable through these models that assist with translation. An example is really, imagine something like a multilingual website, and just being able to create your content in one language and have it dynamically generate all the content in a number of different regions that you operate in. So instead of going to someone and requesting that you need a translator for this information, or relying on an online translator that may not be as accurate, you can literally just do these almost translations on the fly. I was quite amazed just working with ChatGPT the other day, and I think my son was using it, and he mispronounced something, but it obviously sounded like, well, we'll go into Dutch, and there it went to Dutch, and then you could switch over to Spanish, and that just highlights how dynamic these models are. And just by generating, if you said this is my base text for all my marketing material in English, no reason that you can't do a build, and within a few seconds you have all that content in any language.
Does it have an English accent for you, or is it an American accent?
It does. It's actually interesting. When it went to Dutch, it put on a Dutch accent, but it started off American Dutch, and then went into full Dutch, which was interesting. Like the third question, it was full on Dutch, which was
that strawberry? Impressive. Were you testing?
No. That was actually 4.0, GPT 4.0, just with the mobile speech kind of engine that they've got.
I've been using Strawberry, and I think it seems to think more. I think it's just a smoke and mirrors thing. They're just making it look like something's happening.
Well, I thought my mathematics was pretty advanced. So I was joking with Joe the other day about it, and I found this, what I thought was a complex mathematical riddle, and I fed it into what is Strawberry 1.0, and it came back with this beautiful writing out equations. I was like, look, this is beautiful. It's reasoning everything. Now let me go back to 4.0, and it did exactly the same thing. I was like, okay. So obviously, what are they saying? Like in some of the advanced mathematic exams, I think the difference was GPT 4.0 is getting something like 15%, and 1.0 or Strawberry is getting 80-something%. So clearly that's a whole level of mathematics that I'm probably not exposing myself to. So
that's funny. Yeah.
So I was impressed with both of them. But anyway, then we look at another option, which is kind of a good segue, is really speech recognition or text-to-speech. And that's really just allowing users, exactly like I was talking about now, to communicate in their own language, and having the sort of dialogue that would usually be in a text interface, actually in a speech to text, or text to speech as well. And that's really good for doing everything like just summarizing. You can imagine just chatting to an interface provides an easier level of interaction and less of a barrier, especially if you're not good with typing. So things that we would have been exposed to and potential use cases would be if you need a voice assistant. So a voice assistant that helps you sort of convert text-based instructions or any content into speech for, voice assistants, similar ones that, we would know, things like Siri or Alexa or, the Google Assistant. That obviously just enhances the user experience with, better kind of auditory feedback. And then the last one we'll look at is sentiment analysis. And this can cover things like anomaly detection in data or brand monitoring. And really, if we look at something like brand monitoring, it's sort of analyzing customer reviews, social media posts, and any sort of customer feedback to determine, well, what are the customers actually thinking now? What are they saying? What are they talking about? What is their sentiment towards our brand? So it can be a really clever way. Previously you'd have to have someone that's monitoring this, and then they're still processing it through their own internal filters and saying, oh, we feel we're doing well, or we're not doing well, or this is an area that we can improve on. And now we actually have much clearer data from an AI model that would run through all that. And really
and again, the real power behind all this is it can be automated so easily. So instead of having some really sophisticated, as you said, software which gets it right maybe 80% of the time, or having a team of expert humans running through all this data, trying to categorize it, you can just offload this to the AI. So it's like offloading all that sort of functionality, and this is so quick to spin up and to test too. You don't need to invest a large amount into sort of trying to understand, well, do I have to invest thousands and thousands of dollars to even see if this works for me? It's very quick to sort of add in some data and get those answers and sort of understand if will this work for you or not, and then decide to properly implement it into your infrastructure. So it's really great at that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that automation is the key. I mean, that's where cost savings come in. But yeah, so that's an overview of the possible use cases. But I think there's so many practical options, which maybe Makoto, you want to summarize some and just look at kind of what are good use cases.
Yeah, definitely. I think we could come up. These are 5 good examples of use cases for AI, and what you were starting to talk to already is automate repetitive tasks. Obviously, anything that is time intensive, customer service automation, email filtering, expense tracking, those are things that AI can really help with. Processing data faster. Image recognition. We're not talking about the Big Brother facial recognition, maybe, but some of that for sure. If you're especially like manufacturing, vision, things like that you could just pick up really quick, and you want to create things that will be very fast. Document analysis, something that could be obviously legal type of documentation that just takes forever to analyze. I'm sure that has improved since the beginning, where there was a lot of controversy around AI analyzing legal documentation and coming up with fake data behind it. So,
and to add to this, I was chatting to someone, and it seems that it's more and more popular now for these sort of internal document analysis tools. If you have a massive library of digital documentation, you put together an internal only kind of AI chatbot, and it just helps you surface that knowledge. You could say, well, I remember, let's talk about legal. I remember we had a certain case where this was the outcome, and you can quickly find that case and summarize what the differences were with maybe another case. And that is such a game changer, because it would have taken you hours and hours to find that document, review it all, especially lengthy documents, opposed to getting a quick summary and actually seeing any sort of concerns now of things like, oh, well, could the AI be hallucinating? Exactly, oh, this was pulled from this document. You can see this reference right here. You've got all the facts, but it's just pulled it out, made your job so much quicker.
For sure. And helping parents help their kids with homework. I'm not going to say that I don't use that, because I don't remember my fractions and how to add and subtract and divide those.
I was about to say, who hasn't used that? Or I know I certainly have tried that. All right, this is the homework assignment. I'm going to hand you over to my son. Just walk him through it, very basic, while I can see something I'd rather be doing. But I don't know whether
I have used it for my 8th grader for the last 3 weeks for reading assignments, English assignments, everything. But I said, you can't copy word for word. You figure it out first, and then let's use it as a support.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. But social media marketing is obviously that last one with processing data faster. I'm sure, depending on who you are, whether you're Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, OnlyFans, whatever, you're trying to use, AI to regulate that content. So that's interesting of how you program that. Improve uptime and reliability is another one. That could be from smart home monitoring, your vehicle diagnostics, health monitoring. So I think it's going to play a really big part, especially with when you get to health, is something that is important for me and my family, and understanding like when can we detect certain conditions or anything like that is, I think, is very key. And if something is
Yeah.
reliable more than me visiting a doctor, I'd rather use that as a first line of defense.
I've always wondered, just on that point, when everyone's wearing Apple Watches and they're gathering all that data, if they could somehow match that up with people's like hospital records and then sort of use AI to sort of understand those links between all the measuring it's doing on you and, maybe like diabetes or something like that, and predictively say, it looks like you're at risk for this based on 10 million other people who have got the same sort of monitoring data as you, it's going to be hugely powerful. And I can see them going down that road. So
I am curious though, if you haven't heard in the news, 23andMe, the entire board walked out and quit the same day.
Oh, really?
So yeah. There's been controversy around them selling people's data to the government. Obviously, there's uses for good, and there could be uses for evil with that. So the entire board leaving is something's happening. They probably don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So the last two for good use cases are optimized resources. And that could be from energy management, inventory management, traffic management, things that, are, again, that take a lot of data that you want AI to scan and quickly figure out a more optimal way versus a human doing it. That's a great use case. And then the final one is the provide predictive smart insights. And so that could be financial planning, weather forecasting, and sports performance analysis. And I think, weather forecasting, I'm curious to see how accurate that is. Just watch the new Twister. So I'm thinking, can you predict with better reliability about tornadoes when that happens versus what they were using before? And is that possible? That'd be very interesting to see. And financial planning, I use that quite a bit actually for just curious of, the Fed just cut rates in the United States by, 50 basis points. Is that going to crash the market? According to history, it should have. And stocks and crypto are all up today. So it's hard to say, like, is it going to be able to predict those kind of things and help you out? And but those are the 5 examples of good use cases. And I think it's a good segue for the next one.
Yeah. I'll talk a bit about how you can actually then approach to determine in your own company, like where AI can actually help you. So the best way to kind of go about it, if you want to do it yourself or hire a team like us who has the sort of lot of experience in understanding the capabilities, but you're really trying to take, okay, what can AI do right now that's capable, that's, actually feasible? There's a lot of, experimental AI services out there that you can't actually very easily and reliably integrate into your actual organization, in a scalable way. So it's actually important to understand, okay, cool, there's all these models out there and all these services, but what can we actually use in a really simple way that doesn't, require a large amount of tooling to actually get it to work, that we can just plug in and start using straight away. So the idea is to first go through an exercise of understanding what's out there. Let's understand the landscape of AI. Unfortunately, it's changing every day. When we talked earlier about all the different models that are out there, those are being updated. New ones are coming out every second month. So at this point in time, you definitely have to keep your sort of wits about you and understand what's better and what's changing, because they're not small jumps. They're sometimes large jumps, and you don't want to invest into a whole AI strategy with certain models that can be very outdated very quickly. You need to be able to build up your strategy and your services around that you can pivot to these new services as they come out, without you requiring a whole load of rewrites or sort of architecture changes as you've integrated this AI. So it's really important to make sure that you're staying flexible. So it's an idea of like, let's understand what's out there, let's understand the landscape. And then as Makoto just went through and Brynley went through, let's look at what the actual use cases are. And you sort of go through all your entire process flows, sort of ideas that you have, product offerings, trying to understand the market where you can actually see AI coming in, or something that you've always wanted to do, but it was always just seemed too complicated or too expensive to actually realize. Can AI actually help us with that? So you're taking 2 lists, understanding the capabilities, understanding, where we can actually see value in these, and then matching those 2 together. And ideally, once you do that, you've made those matches, and you can start looking into the cost effectiveness and, understanding, okay, do we actually have the data and infrastructure to support the solution? which is another step. So, we've talked about AI being really easy to integrate, but you do have to integrate it, right? You still got your existing systems, your existing databases, your existing data. Do you have enough data to support it? If you want to create a customer service bot that can answer loads of questions, do we have the data that it can actually use to answer those questions? If it doesn't, then it's not going to be very effective. So you need to understand, okay, do we have the data? Do we have the services that easily integrate into AI? Have we built some custom solution which is going to be very hard to match up to it all? Are we currently using loads of third-party services, that just, have their own very narrow solutions that we can't easily integrate all these new AI functionalities into, which can be a big problem. Right now, large software sort of sites and large software services, something like Salesforce, are slowly adding AI integration into their software, but it's very scoped to what they wanted to do for their specific offerings. You can't easily add OpenAI into it and start using OpenAI, which has these amazing models. You have to you're limited to what Salesforce can do. So it's important to understand, okay, what's our existing infrastructure? Can AI actually be easily integrated into it? Once you've seen that and you go, yes, it can, you've looked through all of that and you've got little green ticks everywhere, then it's looking at the cost effectiveness of this. Okay, let's understand the compute costs around this, because AI does cost money. To run AI, to run the services around it, there's a cost to that. There's compute costs for some AI models or token costs for some AI services. You need to understand that and sort of do some sort of feasibility study to understand if it's actually worth it. Is it actually, going to make sense financially for you? And of course, once you've done that, you actually need to implement it and start testing it. One of the main problems with AI I've seen so far is you'll see a lot of really flashy demos that are doing something very narrow. And it looks amazing, and you can be like, wow, that looks like magic. And if I can get that into my company, it can book flights for all my users and, for my staff, and automatically do all this for us. But really it can't. That demo showed a very specific use case. When you try and scale it out to do more for you, it actually can't. So you've got to make sure that you can test it, understand what it's capable of, and then test it as you go, right? Build up a test plan. So as new models come out, you're not sort of adding these new models into the mix and they're just not working in reliable ways. You need to be able to retest them and make sure that when we add in new models or new services into it, that we're still getting the same accurate answers that we were before, as we kind of pivot around between all the different technologies. So it's kind of a long-winded explanation, but really, again, you're just trying to look at all the capabilities of AI out there right now. Look what you currently have. Look at your services, as Brynley mentioned and Makoto mentioned earlier. Look at your repetitive tasks. Do you want to process data faster, improve uptime reliability, optimize resources, do some sort of prediction? All you want to accomplish and try and mash the two together and do a study around that, which can be extremely helpful. When you're thinking about what AI services can you use, we've talked about models, we've talked about all these different services around that. I'll hand over to Bryn, and Bryn, you can sort of discuss it a bit if you want to. Where do you go from there? That when you're trying to understand this landscape, what should you look at?
So you have that approach which Joe you were mentioning, and of course, now it's about lining up services or the actual implementation. So there are a few options, and you could really start again where we started this podcast, looking at the models, and it's really a decision on do you use pre-built, do you have a specific niche requirement with small models, and you train your own. You've got to factor in what that's going to cost to host them, to train them. The larger, as Joe mentioned, the larger the scope, more money, the more resources it's going to take to train that. It's also time consuming, and you're going to need that sort of expert knowledge. So sort of pick and choose, do you want to go down that route of hosting your own model, even training your own model, or do you opt for third-party services? There are a lot out there. I know we've evaluated a lot, and they're often expensive. And the problem is you can also be tying yourself into exactly, Joe, what you were saying, the functional direction that they're going to best support their product, not necessarily your product. So it's general, you're going to have limited functionality. You can't pivot necessarily to where you want to go. Building on what you're saying about Salesforce, they'll do that to, often improve their service offerings. But, when you want to do something custom or move outside, you've got to ask the question, do you want to go down a proprietary route where you're tied into a certain application? Or do you need the flexibility to move where your users are going and pivot, which a kind of custom approach will offer you? And then the last option is really using cloud services. So there are a lot of great, if you look at AWS or Amazon sort of web services, you look at Azure, there are a lot of platforms that offer these cloud services with different models that you can easily tap into and you can integrate into your own software. So there you've
Yeah.
got the ability to immediately take advantage of a secure environment where you can change the technology. You have more opinion on what you could do and what you can use and the direction you go, but you're able to just harness these really quickly and select your models and choose from a different range, have that data security, and keep it within the sort of environment that your organization. If you're a Microsoft shop, keep it with Microsoft,
Yeah.
and use that. So those are some options on how can you practically go ahead and implement this. And
Yeah. And when just to sort of also discuss the last point a bit, when we talk about cloud services, it's almost like model as a service. It's kind of like you're using an existing model out there that existing cloud services are hosting for you and making available for you. So you can pick and choose as you want, and it's really easy just to sort of connect up to them. So just sort of when you're looking at the landscape, it's like, okay, do we build our own models? Do we use existing models, but try and host them ourselves and try and use them ourselves, which is, again, really costly when it comes to compute and infrastructure costs? Do you sort of build out this, just sort of, go with a packaged third-party solution that does it all for you? Again, as Billy mentioned, really limited there. Or overall, do you want to go with cloud services, which in my opinion are just a great middle ground, because it gives you the flexibility to sort of pivot to any models that come out or new ones, or sort of change your direction, but it's still giving you a very reliable infrastructure to build upon without sort of being limited by the other two.
And I think we've kind of covered a whole range of considerations and applications. And you may be wondering, well, I see some potential, but how do we go about doing this? And I guess that's where it comes in. How can we help?
Yep. I think that's the selling the AI pen. Sell me this pen. But no, in reality, if you're more or less confused after listening to everything that was said, it probably stands to think about really which direction do I go? Do I hire some AI professional, take the risk, try to integrate something based on what I think this one person feels or thinks is the best approach? At Impact, we've been launching products, software products for almost every industry for the past 20 years, small, medium, large businesses, you name it. And our approach has always been around a holistic approach where we think about the user. We're user-centric first, not feature-centric, which is this is another thing that could be another feature. And antiquated companies will think about, oh, we just want this feature, that feature, and then I don't care what the user wants. They're just going to get it, and we're going to spend a ton of money to integrate it. That's the wrong approach. We approach it very user-centric, but we also look into business goals, objectives, constraints of the system. We tie this all together, and we have our I don't want to say proprietary, but it's something that we do very uniquely that has really helped organizations understand and lay out a path of what is a priority, what do users really want, how does it affect our business, and create a rapid way in which we do this quickly with leadership to come up with a roadmap of how that is going to happen and create your MVP. And this is something where, because we've expanded our expertise to not just do software products, but actually integrate AI into products. This is something that we feel is very important for organizations getting into this type of feature into their products, because it can be a very expensive resource, a very costly resource if you do it incorrectly. And that can make or break your company.
If I could add in there, I really like the point that you mentioned about, it shouldn't be feature kind of driven. And I think so many people are scrambling on that to get on the AI bandwagon. We've got to have this, and that is the wrong approach. And I think that's why Impact's approach is so valuable, because it is looking at what do your users need, where can the user experience be improved, and from a business perspective, where can cost savings be realized, where can new revenue streams be identified. Going through this process and coming out with the idea of, right, these are our opportunities. How do we tie features to those? Instead of, well, we've got to get a feature out but it has not been validated from any sort of level of user need or revenue opportunity or cost saving.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a good time to wrap up. And yeah, appreciate you listening in today on our episode. And again, feel free to reach out. Let us know if you have any questions, like, subscribe, and thank you again for your time. Take
And
care,
look
everybody.
forward to the next one.
For sure.
Cool.
Thanks.
Go well, everyone.